Hi, I'm Mayor Jim Darling, and this is Meeting with the Mayor. And today we're very fortunate to have our Chief of Police, Victor Rodriguez. Chief,
Mayor, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm doing fine. And first off, I want to say what I think a great job your department does, and your leadership is fantastic and serving our community. So
thank you, Mayor. You're very kind. Thank you. And hopefully we can illustrate some of the high points this time around today.
I was going to say that. One of our reasons today is to talk about the crime rate in McAllen and give the people some of the statistics and some of the background and why those statistics are what they are. So we've historically been ranked 7th or better in the United States, and for cities our size, the #1 safest city in the state of Texas. And so I think we've. I don't know if the figures are. We have our figures. I don't know if we have the comparison figures, but it looks very good.
And Mayor, we, part of I think of the discussion and the reason we're here today is because, we've been basically hinting at the fact that we're getting ready to show what we call the 11th consecutive year of crime volume and crime rate reductions. And for that matter, explaining rate and volume, the same numbers, is just one is represented in the net number and rate is represented in terms of its population. So if you have a decrease in volume and you've got an increasing population center, for example, then let's say you have a 2% negative in volume and you got a 2% growth in population, well, your crime rate reduction is going to be 4% and your volume is going to be a negative 2%. So it's the same data set, it's just represented differently. And that's what we call an apples to apples. That's UCR. We participate in the Uniform Crime Reporting System in the United States, so that all of us are reporting data that's defined uniformly for all of us, and that way we can have a comparison between our city and, let's say, somebody else in the United States.
And these are reported crimes.
Yes,
and so
sir.
I always thought a good statistics were how many solved crimes you had. And I don't know if the things I've seen, it's always been reported crimes. And that's a significant number. It kind of tells you how safe you are. And to a certain degree, it's how effective the police department is in that. But then there's also, we've had
just your volume reporting.
Yeah, you had 5 murders, but guess what? Everybody got arrested and went through a criminal justice system.
And we're talking about how we report here, and we report currently under what we call the Uniform Crime Reporting System. That encompasses 8 different crimes, 7 of which are murder, rape, and robbery, aggravated assault, which we call the crimes against persons. And then there are 3 property crimes, your theft, motor vehicle theft, and what we call large burglary of a habitation or burglary of a building. Those are your basic 7. The 8th one is arson. That's reported by fire departments around the country. It's the 8th category in the UCR. So what I will say with regard to, let's say, violent crime in this UCR reporting process is always the smallest number in the overall number. And I'll give you an example. For example, let's say,
hold that book up. That book is not repetitive. That is what we're going to be talking about today.
We're talking about this, yeah.
There's 2 inches of data.
This is last year's crime report, and one of the things that we will be looking at, for example, like I said a little while ago, let's say last year we had 3,735 what we call UCR crimes reported. Less than 400 of those are what we call the violent crimes. So, and that's typical in every city that reports the UCR way. That is, that the violent crime is the smallest number in the overall crime. So we happen to, I think that, breaking into the news, so to speak here, we have, at the end of 2019, we reported 10 consecutive years of crime volume and crime rate reductions in McAllen. And one of the reasons we're probably here today is because I've been mentioning the fact to you, Mayor, we're basically whispering, and it won't be a whisper anymore, but I think we're going to do 11. I'm very, very confident in our stats for 2020 that we're going to do 11. Now, what that means is that is the lowest crime on record for McAllen in the last 35 years, and after we do 2020 in the last 36 years.
Yeah, we only have records going back for 35 years.
The UCR on record, yes, sir.
And the amazing part is our population's been going like this,
Right.
and the crime rate's been going like that.
So if you think about it, for example, let's say 1985, the stat that we just mentioned right now is better than the 1985 stat. And think about what the population was in 1985. Probably half of what it was last year and what it's going to be this year.
It gives you a sense of security. If I'm a citizen of McAllen, that's a good thing. And it's always be vigilant. And and we're not crime free, but compared to other cities, and that's what we're comparing ourselves to, and our history, the crime, it's very good.
Mayor, we began the conversation about how good we are, how do we compare, and I will tell you this. We can look at crime stats, we can look at volume only, at violent crime only, at property crime only, one particular aspect of it only. We can look at it, and oftentimes it's looked at that way by whomever wants to see it. But I think there is a fact that we are going to pronounce here today that I believe no one can match in the country. And at the end of 2020, and we're going to show, I think, 11 consecutive years of crime volume and crime rate reductions in McAllen. And I don't think there's another city in this country that can match that record anywhere else. And we'll get into just some examples of how significant a change that is. But that is something to be extremely proud about. People always ask how and why. We have a good community, we have good leadership in our city commission, and we have good men and women working at McAllen PD. I think those three things come together very well for us in McAllen.
And we have pretty good cooperation with the adjoining police department, sheriff's department. Good cooperation from that standpoint too. That's important.
Right. Mayor, you and I were at the front end at one point at deciding where to locate what we call the Rio Grande Valley Texas Anti-Gang Center. And I assure you that, and we ended up establishing that here in McAllen. You and the City Commission rose to the occasion and gave us the old PD building at 1501 Pecan. Then we took some money from DPS, we took some money from Governor Abbott. You and I went to go meet with him and basically were able to secure from him another $2.5 million. So we brought $5 million in to basically reconstruct that building and shape it into what now is the Texas Transnational Intelligence Center and the RGV Anti-Gang Center, the TAG Center. And we have transformed regional policing in South Texas with those two operations. We do incredible work because we are co-located in one facility. And we've got about 100 different people working in one place, representatives of 16 different federal, state, and local agencies working out of one place. And it's not a task force. It's not one body of people working for everybody else. It's 16 different agencies co-located, all doing their own work. But the byproduct of them working in one location is the coalescing of law enforcement efforts, and that has really transformed, I think, law enforcement in this part of the state, and that's proving to be extremely, extremely effective for us in McAllen.
And what's so important, and the irony is, with all the rhetoric in the last several years about the border, before nobody knew us about it, but now the tension's been, it's terrible. We're on the border. Mexico is crime all over the place, and yet we're one of the safest in the country.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to get people to understand. And we recruit people, and when they get down there, they realize it. But just the reputation, I should say, it's a false reputation that it's a dangerous place.
It is, and there are data points that are illustrative of that. But I'll give you an example. I used to, I used to chair the Texas Automobile Anti-Theft Authority in Texas.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
So let's, from a state standpoint, when we were looking at auto theft in Texas back then, we basically looked at auto theft in Texas two ways: auto theft north of Interstate 10 and auto theft south of Interstate 10. And the differences were these: north of Interstate 10 recovery was about 80%. South of Interstate 10 recovery was about 20%. They inversed. And they inversed because of the geographic accessibility to Mexico. We knew that we were losing stolen vehicles to Mexico, and once crossed, we'd never get them back. Well, Mayor, I can tell you right now that the big cities in Texas, the Houstons, the Austins, the San Antonios, Dallas, Fort Worth, those cities have far more auto theft today than McAllen. And that's one data point that I would like to demonstrate here in a minute.
I think they probably have more in one day than we have 1 year.
Yes, sir. You know, and just to kind of drive that point further down, you know, in 1992, for example, 91, 92, 93, in that era of time, we at McAllen recorded 2,000 plus, 2,100 1 year, 2,100 motor vehicles stolen in the city of McAllen. Over the last 3 years or so, that has been on the average of 50.
Yeah, 50, amazing number.
50. So from 2,100, we've gone down to as far as 27. We've been at 40 something. We've been at 50. This year we're going to be somewhere between 27 and 50 as well. So we're going. I mean, it's incredible, an incredible stat, and that too goes for the more personal crimes like burglary of residences. The same pattern of incidents of crime for, let's say, those kinds of offenses in Texas. The numbers are there. 35 years. The lowest in 35 years in McAllen, and that's something I think we should be very, very proud. I think it's a product, again, of our community. The citizens are very responsive. They take care of themselves. They take care of their property. They report things, which is all the things we can ask of them. We've got good leadership, and you know that we've talked about a couple of situations where you and I have been at the front end, and tag is here because you helped us make it happen, and that's why it's here in McAllen. And I don't see that ever changing again.
No. Now let's make people that's a good statistic. Doesn't mean you leave your car open.
Right.
Keep locking your car, park it in the right place. Don't be casual about what you're doing.
And Mayor, those are not the only things we do. That the city of McAllen, the city commission has seen through. Let's say 10 or 12 years ago, we began discussing creating a network of cameras in the city of McAllen. We began small, and for now 12 or 14 years, we've been building and improving the technology in those areas. Mayor, that system of cameras has helped us solve sexual offenses, sexual assaults, homicide cases. There are cases galore that we today would not have been able to, at least as efficiently as we did, to solve without that network of cameras in our city. And we keep building on that, thanks to you.
And not only our cameras, but people all over the place have cameras. And you mentioned sexual assaults, and that's a terrible one for this one. If the number looks, I think you would think was higher. It's higher than you would think it would be, but unfortunately, it involves a great deal of them involve family members, and that to me that's the worst statistic that we have, and it's something we really need to pay more attention to. I think as a community and in schools, etc.
It's a family member, a relative, or a dating partner, or someone. 60 to 70% of the crime that happens in that category is always involving someone close to the victim that way. So it's important to mention that. Also, we are in the age of reflecting and reporting. I remember a year or two back we had I think 38 or so or 40 offenses reported in that category, which was higher than normal, but yet 50% of those offenses reported that year happened 6, 8, 10 years ago. So it doesn't matter when they happen, they are going to be reflected the year they're reported.
It could be involved in a divorce matter or something, and you're getting reported later, and those kind of things. So that number doesn't really reflect a true crime situation. I mean, it's a criminal situation, but if you were worried about that happening to me because I'm out on the street, that's not the case. And so sometimes you look at these statistics, it's there's a different story behind them.
And that, looking at, for example, let's say rape and and some of these, what we think, do we have stranger offenses occurring in our city where we don't know who's doing them or things like that. There's a reason why we meet daily, we meet weekly, and we meet monthly to review every stat that we report. And at the end of those meetings, the object is to determine whether we have a serial murder, rapist, or otherwise in our city. Is there something happening we don't understand? Because that's alarming. So that's one reason we look at stats so heavily, to make sure that we don't have something that we are completely unaware of happening in our city.
It's pretty active. How many arrests do we have a year, just gross arrests?
So our arrests on the average are going to be between about 9,000 a year. Of that, maybe 7,500 of those are adult, 1,500 will be in what we call the juvenile category. Now, when we talk about juvenile numbers, there's a juvenile in terms of offenses is one way of looking at juveniles. Juveniles in terms of, let's say, adults, whether they're adults classified for arrest, that's a different way to look at them. So it's not it gets a little cloudy as to who's a juvenile and who's not. And you know that in Texas, 17 is an adult, and therefore you can be arrested. Whereas 17 for some, let's say, family offenses, it's that person's still an underage person. So it all depends on that. But on the average, I would say that number is somewhere about 9,000 a year, with about 1,500 of those being what we call juvenile offenses.
And that number, you can't reflect it just McAllen. We live in a county of almost 1 million people now. So obviously we're not just arresting people who live in McAllen or McAllen citizens. And so you always have to temper all that, any of these statistics, with the overall metrics of the whole area.
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece of information to necessarily reflect on for just a second. All of the things we talk about are things that we are responsible for reporting for McAllen because we took the reports, we make the arrests or whatever. But the city of McAllen may be 150,000 strong in terms of its inhabitants right now. But daytime population explodes. We are the center of retail for South Texas. We are the center of medical facilities in South Texas. We are the center of educational facilities in South Texas. All of these things, that bridge crossings on a daily basis exceed 40,000 back and forth every day. So
25% of our workforce comes into our city,
right.
are not citizens of McAllen.
So where we may be 150 in terms of credited population for the city, let's say that number is 150, 154, whatever it may in the end be. That grows significantly to, I think, well over 200,000 any given day because of the influxes of students, the influxes of shoppers, the influxes of people that come to get services in McAllen. We are the draw in South Texas, and therefore we have those people coming here. So it doesn't matter where they're from. If something happens to them in McAllen and we get the call, and it's an offense that happened in our city, we are responsible for taking that.
So that number, 9,000, seems like a lot for a city of 150,000, but it's like you say, we're a couple 100,000, 200,000, and then plus that. It's an interesting one. I was thinking about the overall statistics in crime. Years ago, we had a problem with people filling up their gas tank and driving away, and that's a reportable crime. Sometimes we catch people and people don't want to prosecute because of whatever reasons, and so those statistics are difficult to define. Or
in our uniform crime report, I would say to you that about 70% of that report is what we call theft. That's the general catch-all category, whether it be that includes shoplifting, it includes someone stealing your bike from your front yard, it includes someone stealing your lawnmower from your driveway. It's a catch-all offense for theft. We have a high incidence of theft in McAllen in that category because we have a high incidence of retail in McAllen. You know that you know what McAllen's standing is in terms of retail. We're 12, 13, 14 every month in the state in terms of retail. That's a lot of retail. The good thing about the retail-related thefts that we talk about is all of those represent a shoplifter caught. So we're going to the mall and pick up a shoplifter. We're going to HEB, pick up a shoplifter. So we have high levels of retail. Therefore, we have high levels of shoplifting, and the plus side of that is that they're basically cleared offenses because you can't report a shoplifter unless unless you've caught somebody. I mean,
That's right, you're catching them, so that's a good.
Right.
It happens, so the higher number, because it happens, the stores and everything are detecting more than that.
Right.
That's an interesting thing too. I mean, calls for service. How many calls? What's your average calls for service, like per day or per month?
We answer Mayor, a call for service every 3.5 minutes on the average in McAllen.
So, so you have to prioritize that. So if it's a relatively petty crime, doesn't mean it's not serious, but it takes a little more time to respond to that because we're getting calls every 3.5 minutes, and so.
At the moment in time that the call comes in, it's classified as one call or another, and depending on that classification, it's going to rise or come down based upon the need, number one, and the resources available at the moment in time. So, yeah, you know, and our calls for service, it's all requests for service. So we could have somebody that say, and so our data point in that area sometimes is reflected this way. Let's say somebody had an accident yesterday, and they'll call, well, you know, yesterday Officer so-and-so took my call. Can I have him visit me? And it was, well, yeah, we'll get him to you. So that's going to take real low value on the dispatch scale compared to, you know, a major accident that just happened, for example.
But speaking of that, how many traffic accidents do we have here in the city?
Yeah, so, you know, McAllen, we're busy. And we have, on the average, 8,000 accidents a year in McAllen.
8,000 accidents a year.
So we at McAllen, we experience a motor vehicle accident, one on the hour, every hour, 24/7, 365.
Thank God most of them aren't serious.
Most of them are not serious.
But got to be better drivers out there, people. 8,000 a year. There's a lot of accidents.
And you know, sometimes you do these surveys, and it's reflective of our growing community. It's reflective of the structural improvements that we're making, and we need to be making, and the planning that needs to be making for a city like McAllen that's thriving, and it's got a lot more to go before it levels off in terms of growth. Yeah.
Well, our police department's a very busy police department. It does a great job, and we appreciate it. We're running out of time, Chief,
yes,
so
sir.
I want to thank you for being here. Send our thanks to all the men and women of our police department and the job they do. And you know, we'll have to do another time and dig down a little bit more.
Yeah, we can do a whole day on this stuff. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here, man.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And this has been your meeting with the mayor.